Okay, good evening. Welcome to this event organised by Sustainability Partnerships on the climate concerns of young people, in particular young Scots, of course, because that's where we are. And we have the benefit of being in a place where 16-year-olds are able to vote in elections. And of course, the young people involved today are voters, they are constituents. And I'm really glad that we have a number of politicians along to join us this evening. My name is Pete Higgins. I'm a member of staff at the University of Edinburgh, and I'm director of a United Nations recognised centre on sustainability education called Learning for Sustainability Scotland. This is the first of a series of 8 events organised by Sustainability Partnerships in various locations across Scotland, all relating to public concerns about sustainability in general and the climate and ecological emergencies in particular. So I'm sure everybody here will recognise that this is the year of the delayed Glasgow UN Climate Change Conference, the Conference of the Parties, as it's called, the COP, which is seeking to gain global agreement on what is, at least as far as I'm concerned, no exaggeration to say, the biggest issue that the human race has ever faced, at least since the last ice age, which was at least a natural event. So I prefer to refer to this as the climate and ecological emergencies, the joint emergencies. You'll have noted from the details that, that the young people involved have a clear awareness that this is a big issue for them. And a recent Ipsos Mori poll showed that 96% of 18 to 24-year-olds are very concerned regarding these issues. So this event this evening, we have 3 of these young voters here, Esther, Dylan and Sandy, and 2 others who are in support, that's Anna and Lee, who are looking after the technology. So to respond to their questions, we have a panel of 3 MPs and 3 candidate MSPs. And if you don't mind, guys, I'll just call you politicians because you either are or you're aspirant politicians, just for short. I think it would probably be best if we just went straight in and dealt with the introductions. So I'd like each of the 3, if you don't mind, I'll just call you students, the 3 young people asking the questions. If you'd like to introduce yourselves one at a time, and then we'll go to the MPs and MSPs. So maybe we can just start with, let me see, Esther.
Hi, I'm Esther, I'm 16 and I go to James Gillespie's. I've been a part of Fridays for Future Scotland, which used to be Scottish Youth Climate Strike, since February 2019, and are also part of Teach the Future, working to bring the climate crisis into education. And yeah, I'll pass on to Sandy.
Hello, my name is Sandy. I am 16. I go to Trinity Academy, and I've been involved with Scottish Youth Climate Strike, which is now Fridays for Future Scotland, since 2019, and I've been campaigning with that group for climate justice in Scotland since then. I'm also a constituent in Edinburgh, Northern and Leith, and Lothian region. Pass to Dylan.
Great. Dylan, you're next. On you go.
Hi, I'm Dylan. I'm also 16. I go to St Kent Academy in the Lithgow constituency. Yeah, I've been in Fridays for Future for pretty much the exact same amount of time as the other 2 have, and I'm also in Teach the Future.
Brilliant, thank you. And I have to say I've worked quite a bit with the organisations that these three young people have talked about, and some great stuff happening out there. Thank you. We'll start with the introductions from the politicians now. Tommy, do you want to go first, please? You're just first on my list.
Sure. Not sure what you want. Do you want a potted biog or?
Just a quick introduction, yes, please, Tommy. Just you know,
okay.
Explaining your allegiance and your very brief background and your interest in these areas. Thank you.
Right. I'm Tommy Sheppard. I'm the Member of Parliament for Edinburgh East. and I'm a representative of the Scottish National Party, the SNP. I got elected first in 2015 and then re-elected in 2017 and 2019. And I only joined the SNP after the 2014 referendum. Before that, for a long time, I was in the Labour Party. So this is sort of second time around in politics for me. And in between the two times, I set up and ran the Stand Comedy Club for 20 years.
Fantastic. Well, we can expect some hilarity later then. Thank you.
Not from me.
Okay. Lorna, would you like to go next, please?
Sure, no problem. So I'm Lorna Slater. I'm co-leader of the Scottish Green Party. That's something I do as a volunteer. Nearly everyone in the Scottish Greens is a volunteer. So I have a day job as well. I'm an electromechanical engineer and I work in renewable energy. But I am also hoping to be elected to the Scottish Parliament in May. And I am the candidate in Edinburgh, Northern and Leith. So I'll be trying to win Sandy's vote and anyone else's vote from there.
Thank you. Callum, would you go next, please?
Hi everyone, I'm Callum Laidlaw. I'm a councillor. I was elected in 2017 for Portobello Craig Miller. I'm also the Conservative Group's education spokesperson, and I sit on the board of Transport for Edinburgh. So I've got a real interest in public transport, which I'm sure will come up today. I'm standing for Edinburgh, Northern and Leith as well, for the Scottish Conservative and Unionist Party.
Thank you very much. Catriona, would you go next, please?
Thank you. Hello, my name's Catriona Macdonald. I am the SNP candidate for Edinburgh Southern in next year's Holyrood elections. Like Esther, I'm a former Gillespie's pupil and my background's in hospitality. I owned a small business, and so my interest in climate change is how we can make sure that our recovery from the climate crisis is a just one that puts local communities and local economies at its heart.
Thank you. And I think Ian.
Thank you, Peter. I'm Ian Murray. I've been the Member of Parliament for South Edinburgh since 2010, taken a very keen interest in these issues. I had a private member's bill and was the first person to use the term climate emergency in Parliament in 2013. Did some really good stuff on plastic tax that got through the Treasury with Alistair Carmichael, the Liberal Democrat MP, last year. I sat on the Foreign Affairs Committee until the election in 2019, specialising in climate change. And I've taken forward projects with the Commonwealth Parliamentary Association to deal with the impacts of climate change in islands in the South Pacific. So I'm really interested to hear what you've got to say today and seeing how we can link that into the work that we're doing in Parliament. Thank you, Peter.
Thank you. Thank you. Now, we're also due to have Christine Jardin join us, an MP, a Liberal Democrat, but Christine hasn't arrived yet. If she had anything like the same technological problems I had, I'm not surprised. So we'll see if she joins in. As we are, we'll just work with the politicians we have. And I think probably the best thing I can do now is give you all a brief overview of how the process will work. So this is in order to really to be fair to everybody in terms of getting their opportunity to speak. I'm going to go through a sequence, and I'm going to change the sequence for every question. So what will happen is one of the students will pose a question that each of the politicians will have the opportunity to respond to in turn. So after 2 minutes, if any of the politicians are continuing to speak, their microphone will be muted. I don't have control over that. The people who've turned into big red apples, so that's Lily and Anna, will be doing the controlling, and they're mean, so I would not mess with them really. So make sure you've got your response done within 2 minutes. You'll get a warning as well. The people watching this probably won't see any of that, but you'll see a succinct statement from each of the politicians. So after we've been through all 5, in this case, maybe 6 politicians, we'll move on to the next question. And so if we'll start with Ian, okay, so if Ian goes first, with question 1, Tommy's next, and then Christine if she's here. What will happen for question 2 is that Tommy will go up to pole position, he'll be number 1, Christine will go up to number 2, Lorna will go to number 3, and that way we give each politician the chance to be first or almost first. Now we've got a lot of questions lined up for you, and we want to give you a good opportunity to respond, and we'll, I'm sure, get a proper overview from each of you as we go forward. But suffice to say, if you have nothing particular to add to something that other people have already said, feel free to say so, or say the minimum. And I know fine that from my work with policymakers across the UK and specifically in the Scottish Parliament, that actually this is a cross-party issue. So it would be surprising if there was not lots of agreement. So feel free to just say, I agree, that's great, let's move on. And that way we'll get to hear more questions and respond to them. So we have about an hour to do this, possibly just a few minutes less than that. And then at the end of the question and answer response session, I'll hand the floor to the 3 students who asked the questions, and they'll get 10 minutes to respond. And then we'll just wrap up and say thanks, good night, and let everybody get back to their lives. Are there any questions from any of the panel members tonight on that process? Great, thank you very much. Well, in that case, if we're ready, I'm sure Anna and Lily have got their stopwatches going. We'll start with the first question, really, which Dylan is about to pose. And Ian, you'll be first, then Tommy, then if Christine doesn't turn up, Lorna, Callum and Catriona. Okay, just so you know who's coming down the line. Okay, over to you, Dylan.
Great. So the first question is, it is often said that the 1.5 degrees limit is unreachable or too ambitious. However, there will be catastrophic consequences that will affect the entire world, including Scotland, if the global average temperature passes this mark. In your opinion, what will the worst impacts be of going over 1.5 degrees?
Thank you. Over to you, Ian.
Well, Dylan, thank you for your question. I think firstly, it's worth saying that whilst many people say that this 1.5% is unachievable, I think it's incumbent on us all on a cross-party basis, as the professor said at the start, to work together to try and achieve that, whether it be at the council level, whether it be at local level, whether it be at UK level or internationally. We all have to work together to make that happen. So I think we have to be ambitious, and I think we have to make sure we try and get towards it. What are the consequences of it? Well, as I said at the start, I have been doing a bit of work with the Commonwealth Parliamentary Association on some of the islands in the South Pacific. They will be underwater. Our weather will change if it's not changing already. If you watch the news tonight, you'll see that many parts of the southwest of England are underwater at the moment. Many parts of the Midlands are underwater with increased flooding again. We're seeing extreme weather changes right across the world. It was last year that we've seen in 1 month Australia was on fire, and the second month it was underwater. So all of those kinds of issues are creating difficulties for weather, difficulties for biodiversity, difficulties in terms of nature. And really, I don't think there's a choice for us to try and make 1.5%, and all of us have to work together to do that. One of the things I think we have to do, Dylan, and this is all of our jobs, including yourself and the organisations that you're involved in, is to try and impress upon the consequences of not doing this to the wider public, and really showing and demonstrating that this climate emergency and climate change isn't going to happen in the future. It's actually happening now and will only get worse.
Thank you, Ian. Really succinct. Appreciate that. We'll go straight on to Tommy, please.
Thanks, Pete, and thanks, Dylan. Don't disagree with a word of what Ian's just said. Maybe add to it in terms of the effects of rising climatic temperature, to add to coastal erosion and flooding and weather. I think also it's going to have a major effect on food production as well, which would lead to increased starvation and hunger throughout the world. I think when we talk about going underwater, we have to realize that in most countries, and certainly in the most populous and poorest countries, the greatest percentage of the population live on the coast or very near to the coast. So if you lose even 10% of the land in a particular area due to coastal erosion and water levels rising, that could be up to 80% of the population who are threatened with their lives. So, I mean, I think as Pete said at the beginning, it's no exaggeration to say that this is an extinction level threat we are considering, and that's why we have to treat it as a #1 political priority. And that's why, and I agree with Ian, that we need to find a cross-party consensus, and all of us need to agitate within our parties as well to try and push people in the right direction, but to make sure that we are open to working together. I think. So I foolishly looked at the clock to see how much of the 2 minutes I'd left, and I put myself off by doing that. But there we go. I think that's that's pretty much. Oh no, the thing I wanted to say was that luckily we're not in America, right? Luckily we're in Scotland and the UK, where actually I'm guessing pretty much everybody on the screen agrees with each other in terms of the scale of the threat and the need to do something about it. So at least we're not having to argue about first principles about whether or not it is a problem in the first place, which is sadly what is the level of debate elsewhere. And just very finally could add that as it is an extinction level threat, it is phenomenally serious, but I think it's also important that we don't get so daunted by the challenge that we give up. So it's important to realize that we can do something about this, and therefore that's why we should.
Excellent, thank you very much. Just so that everybody else knows, there is a 30-second warning for the panelists coming up in the chat, so we should all be able to be succinct. Thank you very much for that, Tommy. Okay, so Christine's not here. We'll go to Lorna next, please.
So I'm obviously delighted to hear my Labour and SNP colleagues. They understand the dangers involved in what that kind of temperature rise for the planet means, because as Greens, we often feel like we're shouting into the void, that people aren't taking it seriously. But the kind of impact I'd like to talk about is the impact on us, what that means for what our society has to look like. So on average, a European person like ourselves has a carbon footprint nowadays of about 10 tons of carbon per year, probably more like 11 and 12. In order to have a sustainable climate, a stable climate, we need to reduce our carbon output per person to 1.5 tons of carbon. So we have to reduce it to about 10%. Imagine if you had to reduce your income to 10%. Imagine you had to live on 10% of what you currently live on. That would be a drastic change to how you live. And that's the kind of drastic impact that we're talking about. Now, this doesn't mean that we're all going to live miserable, terrible lives. That doesn't mean that at all. But it means fundamentally restructuring how our economy works. We can't have this kind of competition growth economy where we use our very precious resources to make plastic widgets that nobody needs. We need to make sure we're using our resources to make sure that everybody has a good quality of life, and that we're working with a circular economy or a donut economy where we don't take out more than we put in. I don't like the idea of individual carbon budgets, particularly because most of us don't have any control over how steel is smelted, over how our energy is generated, over how our homes are built. Those things are the prerogative of governments. So governments have to step in here. They have to make sure that they are putting in laws in place that homes are built to a high standard, that we invest in public transportation so that people don't have to use cars. We have to make these fundamental changes to our society, and those are the impacts that I think we should be talking about.
Thank you very much. Excellent. Just within time. Could I, excuse me, could I go on to Callum next, please?
Thanks very much. I mean, I agree wholeheartedly that this is something we have to take very seriously. At a sort of macro level, I think, one of the things that really has hit home to people is the campaign by Sir David Attenborough about the fact that this is an extinction event, that so many of the species that we love, that are fundamental to the way the world operates, could become extinct. But I think also at a micro level, talking about Edinburgh, Northern and Leith, we are, I myself live on the waterfront. We're building thousands of new homes right on the waterfront. If we don't address climate change, if we don't address rising sea levels, not just in places far away where the impact will be catastrophic, but even close to home here in Edinburgh, it will be hugely damaging for our society. So what can we do? Can we achieve it? And I think one of the issues is people say, well, the UK is only 1% of global emissions. What impact can we have? And I think the impact we have is being a leader. We were the first major economy commit to net zero by 2050, one of the first to commit to phasing out petrol and diesel car engines by 2030, coal power by 2025, and that does have an effect. You know, we've seen that in the way that companies innovate. Coal power is 2% of energy generation. It was a quarter just at the start of the decade. So I think that's what we can do. We can show that you can maintain a lifestyle, you can bring society with you, you can bring business with you, but you can make fundamental changes. And I think if we don't make those changes, and we do have to go far quicker, far faster, I will agree with that, then we do face something that's going to affect all our lives, not just those far away, not just species, animals that are dear to us, but even our own city. So I'm very pleased that this has come to the forefront, and there is consensus across the parties, and I think across the public as a whole, that this is something we need to take very seriously. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you, Callum. Okay, so we've got Catriona next.
Thank you. And as you said at the beginning, Pete, this is not just a climate emergency, it's also an ecological emergency. There's huge consequences for people if we go beyond 1.5 degrees. If warming gets to 2 degrees, 60 million more people will face drought, 1.5 billion deadly heat waves, hundreds of millions of people will be exposed to climate-related diseases like malaria. But the impact on ecosystems is also absolutely devastating. And I'm just going to pick one thing for brevity, and because I am a diver. If we get to 2 degrees, we lose 100% of the world's coral reefs by the year 2100, all of them, and all the life they support, crustaceans, fish, sharks, everything. Even with 1.5 degrees, we still run the risk of losing almost 3/4 of that life. We now know that the climate crisis is accelerating. Previously, we thought we'd hit 1.5 degrees in 2040, but now we know it's more like 2030. So I would echo what everyone else has said about the urgency of taking action. Scotland's 2030 target of a 75% reduction in emissions goes beyond what the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change says is needed to prevent warming of above 1.5 degrees. That's because we have to recognise 1.5 is the absolute maximum. Even if we don't pass it, the impact of 1.5 on people and on nature will be devastating. So we need to take every step we can to mitigate it.
Thank you, Catriona. And I'm very pleased you and actually Callum mentioned the biodiversity issues, because those two things are inextricably linked, and I think they also potentially lead to future solutions. Anyway, it's not my job to speak about this. The reason I'm chairing this is so that I don't speak. Right, we'll move on to the next question. Thank you all very much for that. I'm sure the students will have a response to that at the end. So Sandy is going to ask the next question, and Tommy, you'll be first up, and followed by Christine, so if she's here, then Lorna, Callum, Catriona and Ian. Okay, so over you go, Sandy.
Fantastic, thank you. Okay, my question is, despite the use of words like emergency and crisis, the overall response to climate change falls significantly short. Through the COVID-19 crisis, we have seen necessary and drastic steps taken in response to scientific guidance. Why do you think the same thing is not happening in relation to the climate crisis? Thanks.
Thank you, Sandy. Over to you, Tommy.
I'm not sure why the same thing is not happening. I suppose because for a great number of people, they think it's a concern that they can put off till tomorrow or till next year, and it's not something that needs to be done today. And for a great number of people, perhaps they take the view that they're not going to be around to see the consequences of this anyway. So I think that it is vital that we, continue to step up our campaigns to educate people about the threat to this. I mean, the response to COVID came partly because of a very large coordinated effort between government and media and all agencies to try and make sure the message was across. The consequences of the reaction to COVID and the lockdown and all the restrictions have relied upon a massive public information program, and that's exactly the sort of thing we need when it comes to the climate emergency as well. I have to say that, I mean, in my view, just looking at it sitting in the House of Commons, the actions of Extinction Rebellion cannot be lauded too much. A relatively small number of people in a relatively short space of time, just by taking creative and imaginative direct action, managed to just accelerate this issue through the political priorities in a way that, 1,000 letters to the newspapers or, millions of people signing a petition had failed to do. So every once in a while, I think there's, something happens that allows this to run up a gear. And I very much welcome that, but I think we need to constantly step it up. And, I'm pleased that the Scottish targets are better than many places, but I still want them to be better. They're not good enough. We need to do more and we need to do it faster.
Thank you, Tommy. Great, let's move straight on to Lorna next, please.
So yeah, so given the sentiments shared by everyone on this panel, I'm sure you'll find it as frustrating as I do that Scotland has missed all of its targets. So I have little faith in targets. Targets sound nice, they're nice words, but where's the action? Labour's just opened coal mines in Cumbria. The SNP are committed to endless oil and gas extraction, have not set a date for stopping that. Other countries have set dates for stopping those things. The Tories are expanding roads and airports all over the country. Where's the action? Guys, we have to do something about this. This is within the power of the governments of the UK and the opposition parties of the UK to make these decisions. The UK still subsidises the oil and gas industries to a tune of £10.5 billion a year. That's more than any other EU country. There's a lot of low-hanging fruit here, guys. We can stop giving them money. Do you know they don't pay tax on aviation fuel? Ordinary people pay fuel on their car tax on their car fuel. Airlines, our most polluting industry, doesn't have to pay those taxes. There's a ton of low-hanging fruit. The truth is, we're not even trying. You're saying wonderful words. I like everything you're all saying. So you must find it as frustrating as I do that governments are still expanding those kind of industries that are polluting, that are not talking about reducing aviation, that are not talking about making sure that rail travel is affordable so people don't have to drive and fly, are not talking about. We don't even have laws saying you have to build houses to a certain environmental standard. That's not part of planning permission. It's not possible to chuck out buildings and projects from planning based on environmental grounds. All of this work needs to be done, and it all needs to be done by governments and politicians.
Thank you, Lorna. We'll go straight on to Callum.
Thanks very much. I mean, I agree that the response needs to be accelerated, but I think there's two things here. First, I think we need to take people with us. And secondly, just quite frankly, timescales are a bit longer for some. I'm going to touch on two aspects here: renewables and energy and public transport. Renewables in 2013 were a very small percentage of UK energy. Now in 2020, we're at a stage where the CO2 of grams per ton in energy has gone from 529 all the way down to 181. That's because there's been a huge increase in renewables. We're not quite there yet, but looking at the plans and the projections for that in the next 10 years, by 2030, we're looking to quadruple the amount of wind energy. I mean, the Prime Minister says Saudi Arabia of wind. It sounds silly, but renewables is a real success story. Public transport, again, is something where the infrastructure investment is being made. The UK government has the Union Connectivity Review, which is all about creating high-speed rail networks across the country. And I think that is vitally important. We've seen people are working and moving around in a different way during the current crisis. And I think that is something when it comes to aviation, but it also different ways of travel have to be incentivized. People have to choose public transport over their cars. Pre the crisis, I often had to go to London for business. Obviously the MPs do as well. I tend to take the train because I like the train, but the train is often a lot more expensive and a lot less convenient. And we have to make rail travel much, much more convenient, much cheaper, and public transport needs to be invested in as well. But we also have to understand how people are going to live their lives after COVID, and it's going to be very different. Thank you.
Thank you, Callum. And we'll go straight on to Catriona.
I think the honest answer to this question is that the impact of the climate crisis isn't being felt in Scotland. It's being felt by marginalised and Indigenous communities elsewhere in the world. So it's difficult for people to connect to the climate crisis. Like Tommy said, we need to make people understand the urgency. People are feeling the effects of the pandemic. They understand why these sweeping public health measures have been taken. They don't feel so connected to the climate crisis as they do to the pandemic. And I think that's a big part of why we're not making as much progress as we should. I mean, there are some factors we can't control, like technological advances and the limits of devolved power, but we need to be prepared to learn as we go along and to make use of new ideas. The pandemic is obviously an emergency. When I think about the pace and the extent of public health measures taken over the last year, I see that we have an opportunity here. I see a framework for action on other emergencies like the climate crisis. Like Lorna said, we know action's not being taken fast enough, and that's on us. That's why I'm standing for election. I'm one of a group of grassroots SNP members who are running for Parliament to deliver, among other progressive policies, a Green New Deal for Scotland that pushes the devolved settlement to its fullest extent to act now, and also delivers independence so that we have the full powers that we need to make a real, proper, long-lasting response to the climate crisis as part of the international community.
Great, thank you, Catriona. Ian, next, please.
Well, thank you, and thank you for the question, Sandy. And I think Lorna hits the nail on the head, really, because whilst I'm a politician who believes you should set very ambitious targets, and in fact, you should often maybe set targets that are above what you can achieve, because you need something to head towards. And if you're not ambitious, then you're not ambitious about the actions that need to take. And the Committee on Climate Change reported yesterday that the targets that are being set by the UK and Scottish governments are, in their words, fantastic, but they're unlikely to be met. So rather than talking about targets, Lorna's right, we have to talk about actions to try and achieve those targets. And this is very much an international cooperation issue, and I hope that COP26 in Glasgow becomes something that where the international community comes together to once and for all resolve to do this. And things do happen, it has to happen from the top, and that guidance has to come from the top. Yes, grassroots organisations need to keep pressing on this. The climate strikes were fantastic, the young people involved in that, Extinction Rebellion, etc., etc. But let's not undermine or not diminish the fact that President Biden sitting at the desk in the Oval Office rejoining the Paris Climate Agreement is a significant step forward, because it sets the agenda and it sets an international comparator of which we should all be trying to follow. So my view would be to set much more ambitious targets and try and get towards them, but it's got to be about actions. And until those actions are seeing significant steps towards creating that environment where we can try and get to 1.5%, and Catriona's absolutely right, 1.5% is the maximum, not the minimum. We have to be well below that. And wouldn't it be great if, you know, I don't want to play a game of quizzing here, but, you know, the game would be Kyoto, Copenhagen, Paris, what's next? Well, let's make it Glasgow. And make sure the international community comes together and puts tangible actions in place to ensure that the international community can do that. We can all play our bit, and everything from local councils making sure that residents can use recycling and have city car club points and electric vehicle charging and good transport links, etc., etc., etc. But really, in order to make a step change in this globally, it has to be done at the international community level.
Thank you, Ian. You managed to sneak an extra few seconds in there. One thing I would just say is that all the climate scientists I speak to are in agreement with you about Glasgow. They are all saying this is the biggest one. It's bigger than Paris because we've not made progress since Paris. Okay, we're needing to move on. We've the next question is one that I think Esther is due to read, and it's the one relating to the Paris Agreement. So Esther, would you like to pick up that one, please? And we'll then start with Lorna. Thank you. Over to you, Esther.
Are you meaning question 6? Sorry.
It's his question 6 for you. Yes, it's the Paris Agreement one.
Yeah. So it's been 5 years since the Paris Agreement, and we're now only 10 months away from COP26. And since Paris, as Pete Higgins said, the global emissions have only continued to rise, despite promises from politicians like we've heard now. How can we trust that your promises will lead to action?
Well, I think that you can't trust that the politicians' promises will lead to action. That's exactly what hasn't happened. We've heard all sorts of lovely targets with no actual plan, no commitment. You know, that's a bit like me saying I'm going to drop 2 dress sizes by Christmas, but stuffing my face with brownies. You'd be quite right to say, I don't trust what you're saying. So this is where the onus, unfortunately, has to be on you as voters to hold your politicians to account. Make sure that politicians are delivering on what they say they're delivering on. Don't let them on one hand say, oh yes, great, we're gonna, you know, reach our target. Oh yes, but we're expanding that airport and we're gonna keep digging up oil and gas. And yeah, we're gonna keep subsidizing those polluting industries. Don't let them get away with that. Hold them to account on it. Vote for politicians who actually have a concrete plan for how to get there, who are saying, here's the date. On this date, we're going to stop oil and gas extraction. Here's how many jobs we need to retrain and redirect. Here's how many assets, how many quaysides, how many ships, how many warehouses we need to repurpose for renewable energy. Here's how many train systems we need to build to get people out of their cars. Here's how much we're going to spend on this. Make sure they have those plans and hold them to account on that for voting. And a part of that depends on how good your democracy is. And we're very lucky in Scotland that we have a proportional system of representation, so that you don't have to kind of hold your nose and vote for the least worst option because your vote might be wasted. You can vote for what you really believe in and use that power. I'm so pleased that young people in Scotland have that power to do it. And you have to use that to keep these politicians honest.
Thank you very much. Lorna, Callum next, please.
Thank you. I mean, I echo Ian's comments about COP26. I mean, I think the UK government, bidding to host the climate summit is an opportunity for some really ambitious targets. And how those promises are met, well, some of them are. We've seen the phase out, as I've mentioned already, of coal. We've seen a ban on petrol and diesel cars, which is going to cut emissions substantially in the UK. And we've seen investment in high-speed rail. Fine, that's in the UK. That's 1% of global emissions. What we've seen from Paris, though, is while we have decarbonised our economy, both in Scotland and across the UK, to an extent, we need to go further. I'll validate that. We have seen the opposite in some other economies. And I think this is where the role on the international stage that we, by hosting in Scotland and as the UK as a whole, can play is so important. And that is also giving voice to that next generation to show how much this matters to people. I think, we've seen action on the streets. We've seen changes in the way people live their lives. We're going to come through by the end of this year, this crisis, thinking and acting in a different way. And I think that's what governments, and it is important, a G7 economy like the UK is making those commitments, needs to make bigger commitments, and that puts pressure on others. We've seen that across Europe with as I say, with the phase out of diesel and electric cars. We've now got a similar commitment 2030 in Germany. France is 2040. I suspect that might change. And I think a conference like COP26 gives the opportunity for the international community to come together and really try and address this. I hope we can go further than Paris. I hope those commitments can be met, but that's what we are trying to do. The UK government has made some serious commitments that it has delivered on. And I'm sure that going forward, that's something that we all want to see coming out of Glasgow is a real sea change is in the decade going forward, and by 2030, a real difference.
Thank you, Callum. Perfect timing, I think. Catriona next.
Thank you. And I have to agree with a lot of what Lorna said. All of us here are either elected politicians already or intending to become one. We should expect to be held to account, and we should expect to be replaced if we don't keep our promises. To tackle the climate crisis, we need complete system change. That change is not going to come through political means alone, and the students on this call know that very well. That's why you're here. Lots of countries, though, haven't declared a climate emergency, which I think is the very basic response to the climate crisis. Scotland was one of the first. But why did that happen? It wasn't because politicians one day suddenly decided to care about the climate crisis, which has been going on for decades. It was because of public pressure, scientific lobbying, and direct action like the climate strikes. Even the best and most principled politicians are constrained by the system in which they operate. And those of us intending to join that system need to accept that and to know how we're going to use the platform it gives us to empower communities and create real action. Organising, direct action, building power in our communities, that's what makes change happen, and that's what's going to solve the climate crisis.
Thank you, Catriona. Very admirably brief. We'll go to Ian next, please.
Well, thanks for the question. The irony being, of course, that everyone will fly into Glasgow for COP26 and then all fly out again. And maybe there's something that could be done there as an example of how you should travel rather than that being the case. But I don't say that flippantly, but it is true what's going to happen. Paris was COP21, of course. And I'm going to say that I don't want to add to, you said at the start, you gave us the rules not to add to what other people have said, so I won't add to what others have said on this already, but to say that it's about political will. And we should also talk up the successes. I mean, the Paris Agreement was a huge success. And how do we make sure that when we get those kinds of successes at international level, they are actually actioned, because it's the action that's important. So getting a legally binding treaty together in the international community is incredibly difficult. So we need to make sure if we get one in Glasgow, that it is upheld and people put in place the actions at country by country level to make that happen. The biggest polluters have to be involved in that. So without the US and without China and without Brazil and without India, it's incredibly difficult to achieve any of this. And why? Because climate change, as most other things do, affect the poorest the most, affect the poorest countries the most, and affect those that pollute the least the most in terms of the international community. So we have to try and get that message across, and everyone on this call knows exactly what you have to do is put your crosses in boxes for the politicians that say that they do what they say. It's very, very difficult. Of course, we're all just individuals doing our own bit, but if we all do our own bit, that does mount up into something else. That's what activism is all about. And I would just encourage everyone to continue to keep doing what you're doing, because change is slow, change is difficult. Let's be realistic about that, but it can happen and you can make it happen.
Thank you very much, Ian. And we'll go next to Tommy, finally, for this question.
Thanks, Pete. I agree with much of what has been said as well. Esther, as for reasons why the Paris objectives haven't been achieved, I mean, I think there's going to be a lot of them, and some of them are to do with what Lorna said earlier about people making targets without having plans to implement those targets. But there are also some big geopolitical reasons why it's been set back and made more difficult. And I don't think we can underestimate the negative contribution that Donald Trump has made to this over the last 4 or 5 years, because not only has he dissociated America from the process and tried to impede efforts at carbon reduction there, but by doing that, and by the general impression he's given, he's made it harder to engage China and many other big players as well in an international effort. So I think his Donald Trump's contribution to undermining the international effort in climate change is immense and cannot be overstated. Just a comment on trust. I mean, I think the question was, can we trust any of the people, any of the politicians? I mean, I've always thought politics is far too important to be left to politicians, and so. But from what I've seen, over my lifetime working with people engaged in politics, the vast majority are decent, trustworthy people. But that doesn't mean, and I think that you can trust them in the sense that if they say they are going to do a specific thing, then most of the time they will do it. And if they don't, as Catriona said, you have the chance to get rid of them and you should hold them to account. But I don't think you should trust politicians or trust anyone in the sense of then delegating responsibility and confidence to them and thinking that because a bunch of people who in Parliament said they'll take care of this, that they're going to. Because with the best will in the world, they're going to come under all sorts of competing pressures to not make some of the bold moves that are needed. And it is vital that there is a grassroots activist pressure on all of us to make sure that this is pushed through every single institution of government, whether it be Scottish, UK, or indeed at local government too.
Tommy, thank you very much for that. That's good. And I'm really pleased that you came back to that issue of trust there, because I think it is fundamental to the whole of our approach to these big issues, because they're very scary and we want to be able to trust policymakers. I've been trying to make sure that we had time so that if Christine joined us, we could deal with, we could engage her in some of these questions. But it doesn't look like she's coming. And so we have just a wee bit more time than we might have had. And I'm suggesting to the students that they have the opportunity to ask you one more question before I give you the finishing question, which I'll explain right at the end. And so Lily has said that they have an idea, which is going to be Esther, I think, is going to ask this next question. So Esther, if you're ready, it is a question, by the way, you've all seen, all the policymakers have seen, it's just that we're doing quite well with regard to time. So Esther, just go ahead and ask your question, please. Or is it Dylan?
I think this is
Whichever one of
officially
you.
Dylan's.
Okay, Dylan.
Question 4, right?
Question 4.
Great.
Teachers.
Yes. Okay. So
Close to my heart, Dylan.
very important one. A survey by SOS UK found that 75% of teachers feel that they don't know enough about climate change. How can you ensure that my teachers will have the skills to teach me about the climate and ecological emergency which my generation is facing?
Okay, this is, as I say, very close to my heart. Callum, we'll ask you to go first, please.
Thanks very much. It's something I'm very passionate about as well. As I said, I'm the education spokesperson for the Conservatives on the council. My mum's a teacher, my aunt's a teacher, and I think, you know, teachers can, as we've seen during COVID, have to be supplied with the right tools and content to tell the stories that they want to tell and which are part of the curriculum. So I think there's two things here. The Scottish Conservatives are calling for a review of the curriculum post the elections. You know, should we be in power? I think that curriculum does need to be refreshed for many reasons, but one is to reflect the reality we live in now, and part of that has to be around climate change, the climate emergency, around extinction, and that is a story to tell across subjects. I don't think this is a subject that can be taught in one discipline, but I think it's taught by teachers in different sectors. And I think part of that is also thinking about how teachers can tell that story, that's getting out into, you know, the environment surrounding their schools. I'm a great believer of outdoor education in that respect. I think it's using some of the great content that's being produced. We've seen this actually during COVID from leading academics and specialists and the likes of David Attenborough to bring that to life and to give those teachers who might not really be that confident in delivering it themselves those tools to make sure people get excited, are motivated, and also, you know, we talked about this already, the sort of citizen activism, what people can do, those small changes. And one thing the council can do, local authorities can do, I realise I'm running out of time, is make sure we practice what we preach, make sure that we have more energy efficient buildings, less waste, less plastic, which drives me mad, and ensure that our school environments are engendering our next generation, having those skills, having that understanding, but also delivering it themselves. And I think that's how, you know, the future generations are so important. And I think teachers want to deliver that, they just don't necessarily have the tools right at this moment.
Thank you, Callum. And I think next it will be Ian.
Thank you, and thank you for the question. I think, you know, looking at the curriculum is a very good place to start. And you do feel that if you're going to mould the curriculum, then you have to retrain in terms of how that would be taught. Professor will tell us that universities are incredibly good at this, but in terms of what the universities do is they're teaching to people who've already committed themselves to these subjects already to a certain extent, who do university courses. It's how we can widen those things out to a much wider population. So that's got to be done through schools. Somebody got a really good idea in the chat actually of how politicians and policymakers could work with organisations like Teach the Future of how this could be best taught, how those packs can be put together and how teachers can be helped to deliver those packs. So we don't necessarily always have to depend on teachers, of course, to teach. We could depend on each other and others in the classroom and peer teaching as well. But if we want this to be a cultural generational shift, and it has to be, because the generation that has to fix this is some of the people on this call, but not all, if you don't mind me saying that, with the people who are slightly as old as me and slightly older. It's your generation that has to fix this. And therefore, in order for us to be able to do that, we need that culture change, we need that shift. And that culture change and that shift mainly comes through education. And if it's got to come through education, it has to come through the curriculum and has to be a formalised process. Otherwise, if it's a nice to do box, it won't be done.
Thank you very much for that, Ian. And next is Tommy.
3 points, I guess. I think the first one is that we should probably engage ourselves a little bit more on how the curriculum is developed. The curriculum for excellence is, I mean, it's Education Scotland's responsibility to draw that up, which is a government body. but it is gets advice from the Curriculum and Assessment Board, and their meetings and the minutes of them are public, so we can actually look at how we can lobby some of these agencies to make sure that the curriculum is is developed and is improved. Having said that, there is a learning for sustainability objective within the Curriculum for Excellence at the moment. And it's up to schools and individual local authorities to determine the lesson plans as to how that is implemented. So I think there is some scope for innovation and pushing at a school level as well. And finally, I think there's a big effort that needs to be done in terms of teacher education and making sure that this whole area is front and center of how we train the next generation of teachers that are going to be coming into schools over the next 5 to 10 years.
Thank you, Tommy. Christine, oh, she's not here, of course. Who's next? Lorna.
So I'm not sure that teachers are the problem particularly. When I speak to young people get it. Young people understand what's going on. I think they're very well educated. And I think Dylan and the other climate strikers deserve a lot of credit for that. They have managed to make mainstream something that the Greens have been shouting about with nobody really listening to us for like 30 years. And suddenly the climate strikers come along and you brought it, you made it mainstream, you made it happen, you made people pay attention. So I think it's a question of how do you, young people, educate your teachers? How do you educate us, the older generation? How do we educate people who are older than us? The rows I have with my own parents, they just don't see the problem. They don't understand why they should change anything about their life of consumption and, you know, the size of their cars or anything at all. So I think young people get it. And we need to work together to make sure that politicians get it, that business leaders get it. You know, I get invited to, you know, sometimes to speak to business leaders and stuff, and they always go, why have we never heard this before? Why are you the only person saying this? Or better yet, they go, why is nobody saying this? I'm like, I'm literally here. I'm literally in your room saying this to you, but it somehow doesn't compute with them. So I think what we need to do is, instead of worrying too much about teachers, because as my former colleagues or the other panelists said, there's plans for helping support teachers there. Let us help you guys, the young people, train all the older generations in what it is we need to do.
Thank you. I love that idea. And Catriona, my apologies. It's just keeping tabs with all the different sequences. You're on next.
Thank you very much. I suppose to answer this question, Swear, I'm quite keen to listen to what you three think. I left school in 2012, which wasn't really that long ago, but I can't remember ever learning about the climate crisis, or at least not as anything other than a fairly abstract concept. I think, not to repeat anything that anyone else has said, although I agree with quite a lot of what Lorna's just said there, training for teachers needs to equip teachers with the skills to be able to then teach pupils to think critically about the current narrative on climate issues and also challenge climate change denial. Students also need to have the opportunity to learn on a more wider basis about the role that Scotland and the UK have played in creating this crisis through industrialisation and colonialism. In my experience, young people have a pretty good grasp of climate issues, including climate justice, which we haven't yet had the chance to talk about. And they do seem to understand the global and the human rights aspects of these issues far better than a lot of older people. So I'm quite keen to see climate education built into professional education and training for those who have left school. This needs to go beyond the education sector. As an example, the Tenants Union Living Rent campaigns for sustainable house building as part of its work to guarantee affordable, high quality homes for all. And as part of that, union members like me can learn about things like how new technology can ensure maximum energy efficiency in building, and about the environmental impact that building poor quality housing that then has to be demolished a few decades later has. The climate crisis impacts every aspect of our daily life, so it needs a joined up solution. Yes, young people do need to learn about climate issues in school, and I'd love to hear from you about how we can make that better. But we also have to look at how that education can be extended and made accessible to everyone.
Thank you very much, Catriona. I see Christine's joining us, and I'll give her a chance to settle in, and then perhaps she might want to give us some responses to a couple of these questions. Christine, your mic's off at the moment. Can I just introduce myself? I'm Pete Higgins, I'm the chair. You're welcome. I'm sure you had a really good reason for being delayed tonight.
Bit of a diary mistake. Apologies for that.
All right. Okay.
We had the wrong time in.
Okay. Well, we have 15 minutes left, and we have one question to cover, which is one that I'll ask. The question we're on at the moment, which if you feel minded to respond to it, is this one. I'll just read it out for quickness. Dylan gave the question earlier. 75% of teachers feel they don't know enough about climate change. How can you ensure that my teachers will have the skills to teach me about the climate and ecological emergencies which my generation is facing? So, Christine, I know you'll be good at thinking on your feet, but I'm sure you've got a response. And where you go.
That's actually a really good question, and it's something that I hadn't thought about. But you're absolutely right. If we're going to be teaching about climate emergencies, that we have an entire generation who want to know more, and we shouldn't just be getting our information from David Attenborough programmes, wonderful though they are, and news items. It should be part of the curriculum, and it should be taught properly. But that will mean that there is a responsibility on government to ensure that the information is available to teachers. Maybe if the information, if the government has a responsibility for making sure the information is available to teachers, and that it's part of teacher training, and it's part of the curriculum, and it's part of PACs, the government might actually learn a thing or two, and it might actually encourage them to act on climate change and to do a little more. But I think it's a very good question. Perhaps we had all assumed that science teachers would carry the load for teaching it. But no, do we think that perhaps we need a specific strand within the curriculum which deals with climate change, or should it be part of every subject? You know, economics, there's an economic impact. History, what damage did we do to that? Literature, it should be part of the English that we read and the essays that we write. But I think more and more, everything to do with climate change is becoming integral to life, to decision making, to transport planning, to economic planning, to house building, everything. And I think it has to become part of education in exactly the same way. It just needs to be part of the fabric of what we do day to day. Because apart from COVID-19 and obviously the economic impact that it's having on everyone and will have for some time to come, I actually believe that the climate is going to be the overriding priority for politicians moving forward, from whatever party they're in. They're going to have to recognise that we need action. And it's been a big week this week. And for me, the high point was seeing Joe Biden sign the executive order, which brings America back in to the Paris Agreement. And I think that's an important step. It's a first step, but it's an important step. And I think it shows that there is an awareness and that we are getting there. But it is an incredibly good question. I had not thought about that. How are teachers going to have the necessary information to teach the subject properly? But it's something that we have to address. And I think actually now we have to task the Scottish Government with finding a way of doing that.
Thank you very much for that, Christine. If I may just exert a little bit of chair's prerogative, this is something that is my day job. And just for everybody's information, the General Teaching Council for Scotland has just reaffirmed that learning for sustainability is a core requirement of all teachers in Scotland, that it is an entitlement of all learners in Scotland. The expectation that schools move towards sustainability in whole school approaches, the facilities they have, that's an expectation which is in Scottish Government policy. The Scottish Qualifications Authority have included it in the subject specialisms where they're every new course and all ones that are being revised to include learning for sustainability, and so on. There are many things that are in place. The issue really from a professional point of view, I would just say this is it's actually very hard to encourage schools to really think it's a real thing that they have to do. And a lot of the pressure comes from students, and it's very difficult for teachers to find the time and the wherewithal to do this. It's something that the local authorities have to deal with as well. But there's a lot of stuff in Scottish Government policy already. But that's another thing. That's my world. Okay, thank you very much for that, all of the panelists. We'll move on to question 6 on my list, which is a timer reminding me that I need to stop talking as well. So this is a question which came from a student at Musselburgh Grammar, and it was a survey that was conducted recently, I think by the student panelists really. And it's this: what do you think the world will be like in 50 years' time? Now, I'm sure everyone listening to this is immediately thinking, whoa, right, let's hope we got some positive futures out there. And the first on the list is Ian. Would you like to go, please?
Gosh, what a great question. Where do I think the place of the world will be in 50 years' time? Well, I hope that we reflect back on this period of time and realise that when it was called upon for us to do something about it, we did, and not having a conversation in 50 years' time as things continue to get worse. I mean, there is only one planet, there's only one responsibility for saving it, and that's ours, and we have to do something about it. So where will we be in 50 years' time? I think we'll live in a completely different world. We'll be much more interconnected, but we'll be much more interconnected without travel. We'll be much more interconnected in the workplace. Technology has a real opportunity to help us resolve some of these issues. I hope that if we are continuing to travel around the planet, we're doing it with environmental issues at the forefront. So we have fuels that are not burning fuels and not affecting our environment. I hope that the poorest aren't hit the hardest with regards to climate change. And I hope that kind of social justice and equality is a key part of what we're looking at. So yes, well, where will we be in 50 years' time? But I'll be in the ground somewhere, so maybe the grass will grow around me in a fashion that means it's environmentally sustainable. I'm not sure, but what a great question.
Thank you, Ian. Tommy next, and Christine, you'll be after Tommy.
Well, I guess I'll be in the ground before you, Ian, just in an actuarial sense. I think that, I mean, the key thing I'd like to say is that it'll be what we make it, because the world is shaped by people. It is not, there are no inevitabilities here, certainly not over a 50-year timescale. So the extent to which the world becomes a fairer, more equal, more pleasant place to live, where we have more respect for one another as human beings, and we live in greater harmony with our environment and other creatures on the planet, that's all down to us, to all of us, and how we agitate and organize for that. And anything is possible. And I think, although, you know, this looks like a very bleak place at the minute, in the middle of the pandemic and with the climate crisis and a whole lot of bad stuff happening throughout the world, I think it's worth asking yourself, well, where was the world 50 years ago or 100 years ago? And actually, as each generation has got on, there have been more and more democracy, more and more democratic systems of government in the world, more and more people enfranchised, more and more people able to have a say in things. And I think the most important thing for me is that we have political systems that allow individual people to determine the way in which the resources of the world are shared out amongst each other. And that can be very difficult indeed in a very interconnected global environment where money and capital can move in a blink of an eye. So we need to be looking as citizens about how we develop structures and use that technology to be able to hold all that to account and bend it to our own will. So I don't know where we're going to be like everyone else, but that is where I would hope that we can be in years to come.
Thank you very much, Tommy. Christine, your 2 minutes starts now. You're muted. Christine?
Yeah, the ground's going to be very crowded because Ian and Tommy and I are all going to be there. But it is an excellent question. And I remember on Tommy's point, you know, what was the world like 50 years ago? I remember when I was at school and everyone was saying, oh, what will the world be like in 2000? And we had this Star Trek type vision of what the world would be like in 2000. We'd all be driving hovercrafts and there'd be monorails and everybody would be living in high-rise buildings. And I remember even there was a documentary that we watched about planning when I was at school, about how they were looking at building down the way, and the planet was going to be so crowded that we would have to all live either in high rise or underground. And none of it has happened, absolutely none of it. But what has happened, as Tommy says, is the social change. And what we can do is we can use the technology to keep progressing with social change, to keep moving forward, and to ensure that the planet is actually still here in 50 years and that climate change doesn't overwhelm us. And I think that has to be our priority. What we will invent and what the planet will look like, and you know, is a different thing. But I think society is what we have to focus on, and we have to focus on building a stronger, more environmentally aware, more well-being aware and more people aware society than we are even at the moment. We are much better than we were 50 years ago. The number of the diversity in Parliament, for example, is a world apart from where it was in 1970. You know, it was 10 years after that we had our first female Prime Minister. And if you ever get to visit Parliament, look at the photographs of all the various different cabinets and things which are on the walls and places, and you'll see there's virtually no women at all. And it's all white faces. And that has changed dramatically in 50 years. So that sort of progress, we know that we can achieve, and we have to keep working on. And as Tommy says, the world in 50 years will be what we make it now.
Thank you very much for that. Christine, we'll go straight to Lorna.
I absolutely love this question. Something that journalists always kind of try and sort of trick me with when they're talking to me is they kind of go, they sort of lean in and go, so the green future is going to be awful, isn't it? You know, we're all going to be living in hovels because we can't do anything fun. And it's like, no, that's not it. That's not the green vision for the future. The future can be brilliant, and don't let anyone tell you otherwise. We have a great future ahead of us. And what it looks like is it looks like an economy that's designed around our well-being, an economy that makes sure that we look after people, not that we just maximize profits. What we've been doing is deeply dysfunctional, building our economy on competition and greed and danger and destruction. Who's that actually benefiting? We could restructure our economy to benefit people, to make sure that everyone has clean air, green space, a reliable income, and a secure tenancy to make sure people's medical and care needs are met. We can absolutely do this. It requires vision, but we can do it. It means we can have livable city and town centers that are not dominated by cars, where it's safe for everybody to breathe and move around and wheel and walk. We can build those cities, and then we get to live in them. Imagine having a universal basic income so that there's no complicated bureaucracy or dehumanizing PIP assessments, so you don't have to worry about the DWP leaving you in terrible poverty and not being able to feed your kids. Everybody gets a universal basic income, a basic payment, a sort of dividend for all the work you contribute to society. And, you know, and then a jobs guarantee would partner with that so that everybody who wants to work can do meaningful work in their community, the kind of jobs that we really need done. It could be something like a 4-day work week. It's lots of evidence has shown that working a 4-day week improves productivity. If we can work a 4-day week for a living wage, we might live a slower pace of life, but we work less, we might buy less, but we would enjoy ourselves more. We can prioritize family and friends and books and sport over foreign travel and buying the latest gadget. We can absolutely change how our economy works, and we can change how we use our land and resources to make a better place. We can have a peaceful and really brilliant future. We just have to have the vision, and we just have to grab it.
Thank you. I wanted you to go on because I kind of like that future, but your time was up. Thank you for that, Lorna. Callum, you're next, please.
Thank you. In 50 years' time, I hopefully may just about still be here, though I don't know how much walking, wheeling and cycling I'll be doing. I think, Christy made a good point. There's been a huge amount of societal progress in the past 50 years, but the way we live perhaps hasn't changed quite as much as it should. The reference to monorails and high rises was sort of glib, but actually, if people did live in higher density developments, which is something which we could change, it's now actually very hard to build a high density development. That would be a good thing for the climate. If people did use public transport more to get around, that would be a good thing for the climate, and that is hopefully coming. So I think there is going to be a change in attitudes. This next generation, it's great that there's over 100 people on this call that you want to get involved, that there's familiar faces that have already got involved in politics at a young age. You are going to be the next generation, and the rest of us are underground or in care homes. And we've already seen that change in attitudes over the past 20 years. When I was your age, everything had to be, the latest. The disposable items were great. Everybody wanted everything brand new. Factory farming was the norm. Recycling was a bit of a sort of esoteric passion for some people, but it wasn't the norm. And that has completely changed. And I think that's what we're going to see continual progress. We are living in a period of massive change right now. It may feel rather depressing that we're doing this on Zoom. In fact, I saw today we should have our cameras off because it actually uses quite a lot of carbon. But we are going to live and work in a different way. And sending an email also uses quite a lot of carbon, FYI. So minimize your emails. That's probably not a bad thing. But we are going to live in different communities. We're going to probably live closer to home. We're talking about 20-minute neighborhoods now on the council. The way that we live and get around is going to change. And I hope that communities are more empowered. We're seeing that, across the board in the UK, that communities want to have a say in how they operate, how they live. I hope government and politicians devolve more power further down, that people can make more decisions about their lives. And I think if people can do that, that next generation is going to make positive change anyway. So I am quite optimistic about where we're going. I hope to live to see it. Thanks.
Thank you. And Catriona next, please.
Lorna, I absolutely love your energy. This is how I feel when we're thinking about the future. That is the kind of ambition that we need, the kind of positive hope for the future that we need if we're going to get past the climate crisis and start building a better future. I don't want to repeat anything you've said. I agree with everything. So I'm just going to pick up on one thing, because we passed a milestone today that's incredibly important to me. As of today, the Nuclear Ban Treaty makes nuclear weapons illegal under international law. 51 countries have ratified the treaty. Unfortunately, the UK is not one of them, because the UK government considered its nuclear deterrent Trident the key to its military power. But global peace is central to tackling the climate crisis. In the EU 15 countries, which includes the UK for the moment, in the military and defence industries are responsible for the same level of greenhouse gas emissions as civil aviation. While we were all ditching single-use carrier bags, the Iraq war was racking up a bigger carbon footprint than Spain. Ending war is not just a moral question, it is a crucial part of tackling the climate crisis and building a better future for the whole world. The climate crisis feeds war and is fed by war. Climate change is what's called a threat multiplier. It won't cause war on its own, but it will amplify existing problems and make conflict more likely. We know that. This has happened over and over again for decades. The UN first began linking climate change to war when it cited famine and drought caused by climate change as contributing factors in triggering the Sudanese civil war back in the 1980s. So I've got one political ambition to build on from today. When Scotland becomes independent, I intend to make sure we scrap Trident and pursue a new peaceful diplomatic approach to international relations and conflict resolution. And I'm perhaps a wee bit younger. In 50 years' time, I hope I'll still be enjoying my retirement in a progressive independent Scotland as a citizen in a world that's at peace and free from nuclear weapons.
Well, what a bunch of blooming hopeful things to hear from some of you there. That's a lovely thing. Can I just now remind everyone what will happen next? The students will get 10 minutes to respond, and then I'll spend a couple of minutes at the end just wrapping up. So I'm sure you have plenty of things to say. So I'll just pass the floor to yourselves, Esther, Sandy and Dylan. On you go.
Hi. So yeah, I just wanted to start with thanks for coming. It's a great thing to, give up your time at least to talk to us about this, which shows more than some politicians show of commitment to climate change. So that's great. Yeah, so It's really, really important that whatever parliament we elect represents young people's views, but it's also willing to take the necessary action to prevent climate breakdown, because those two things are going to be intertwined for my entire life. And we have the chance to make the difference right now. So who we elect is going to be the changing point. So out of what was said, some were really good. I think most was good, which is really a great thing to hear. There were some iffy things, but I'm going to focus on the good things for once. So a few things that stuck out to me was the mention of transport. So this one I feel quite a lot, because I'm in the central belt. I'm not in Edinburgh necessarily, I'm on the outskirts, and public transport is awful, and it's supposed to be good here. This is the area where it's supposed to be good, and we can't expect people to start changing how we live. And we heard from Lorna about the tons per person each year. We need to change how we live, and if the infrastructure isn't there, how can we be expected to do it? And that comes into that we don't get to choose which issues we need to care about right now. It has to be everything. The time to choose issues was 10, 20 years ago. Now we have to do everything all at once, and transport is one of the areas alongside agriculture that we have done the worst in terms for emissions. So I'm very glad that that got brought up. I also heard about phasing out coal, and this very much links to we just can't trust political statements, because we know that they have said they're going to phase out coal, but this isn't necessarily in Scotland, but in West Cumbria, there's a new coal mine being opened right now. And the UK government could have called in plans for an inquiry if they wanted to, and they didn't. So how are we supposed to trust anything they say about commitment to climate change? And then there was also the ban on the Heathrow expansion was overturned by the other Supreme Court. And yes, that's the law, but the law is political. Our politicians can change the law. So how can we trust them? And I guess that's the point, really. Can we trust all of this? That's kind of the thing I'm being left with, because I've heard really, really good things from everyone here, but I still get that little pang of, oh, what if they don't do it if we elect them? So that's kind of my main point. Everyone here mostly gets the big impacts. So I guess the thing I would want you to do to make sure you actually take this action is put yourselves into my shoes and Esther's shoes and Sandy's shoes. I'm probably going to live to see 2050 and then live much longer after that. All of these targets I'm going to see, every single thing. I might even be in the political world when this happens and dealing with whatever targets that we're set now. And that's going to define our lives. The news right now isn't great, but we have the chance to make the news of my adulthood not so depressing. But the difference is there won't be a vaccine to the climate crisis in 2050. We're going to have to deal with it, and we can't really reverse it. So just feel the urgency that we feel, and I think most of you do. So yeah, I'll pass on to Sandy now.
Thank you.
Gosh, hard words to come after. Thanks. One thing. Thank you all for talking to us and talking to everyone here. One thing that did strike me tonight that I heard a lot was words like hope and political will, and it did sort of strike me as odd coming from politicians to talk to us as if we're meant to inspire hope. And young people, I think we have inspired maybe hope, or we have encouraged hope and political will through our actions, but it's your job to really provide hope for us. You are the adults, you are the politicians, and you are in the position to create amazing change, arguably a lot more than us, because you are in positions of power if you get elected. So I would ask you to think on that and think, how do I inspire hope in young people and provide them with hope? Because no one's really doing that for us right now. We're having to do all the providing of hope, and that's pretty rotten for young people. Also wanted to address some things about my first question. Obviously the pandemic has been really challenging for all of us. We have taken steps to ensure that our loved ones are protected. And we've done that because it's been made very clear to us that it will save lives. Now, the climate crisis will be far worse than COVID-19, as I think everyone has shared that tonight. And yet we rarely hear anything from the government on how we can tackle this crisis. and we rarely get any updates on our progress as a country in reducing our emissions. We often face a media fielding both climate scientists and climate deniers as if it is a 50-50 argument. And the next Scottish Government, whoever that may be, whoever gets elected, has a role to play to help us face this crisis. You must set the tone and lead the country to rapidly reduce the emissions on a far steeper pathway than we're currently set. Also, it really shouldn't be forgotten that this COVID-19 pandemic, if climate change is allowed to run away and get much worse, we are likely to see far more pandemics, global pandemics, and we'll see another 2020 every few years. And I think we can all agree we kind of want to avoid that. So yeah, to wrap up, if you take one thing away from today, please take this thought. Scientists have been warning about a global pandemic similar to COVID-19 for years. They knew it was coming, and yet their cries on how to stop it fell on deaf ears until it was too late. Do not let the same thing happen with climate change. I'll pass to Esther.
Thank you, Sandy. Esther, I know you want to come next.
Hi, yeah, so again, thank you so much for this evening, and your responses have been really, really great, which I have to say I was not entirely expecting, so it was nice. Since the beginning of February 2019, I've been working to wake up the people on the fact that we have one of the biggest crises that Earth has ever faced and humanity has ever faced hanging over our heads, playing out in front of our eyes. And I think today what hearing your responses showed me is that that worked. We've now woken up. What you're saying is great, but I cannot stress the importance that we need to turn what we're saying into action. Like, as I said in the question, targets have been set, things have been said for years and years and years, but now is the time that we really have to turn this into tangible action. Scotland is it's not one of the highest emitting countries at all, as you've said, per what CO2 we send out into the world, but per capita we're really high. We're higher than China, which a lot of people seem surprised at. And I think for that, and yet I'm getting a bit muddled over it. As Catriona said earlier, in Scotland we're not suffering any of the consequences yet, and the places that are suffering have emitted the least. The people that are suffering have contributed the least. And to me, that gives us a moral responsibility and just a responsibility in general to turn this into action and to strive for higher targets than we already have, because if we just do enough to reach 1.5, that does not allow for climate equity that is clearly laid out in Paris. And we have to push to get much harder, much faster targets than we already do. And it's great that they exist, but currently we're not achieving our targets. So how are we going to get 2045? How are we and sooner, which is what we need to come from Scotland and places that have the ability to. At a few points this evening, it was suggested that it was our responsibility as young people to ensure that this will play out and put pressure on you guys and make change with teachers and things like that. And I'd just like to add on a personal note, activism and what we do is amazing, but it's incredibly draining and incredibly depressing and tiring. And I don't feel like it's fair for that responsibility to be on teenagers trying to live their lives. That responsibility should be on you guys who are now in the biggest position with the most ability to make the change. And we need to see that play out. As a teenager, I never really want to think 50 years in the future because it looks bleak. And with the current situations and our current commitments globally, I never see how we can get through this in 50 years' time have somehow mitigated the effects to the point where we don't have to feel guilty for how much we've damaged the earth and where we can live alongside the planet. And this conversation has filled me with the hope that maybe we can, but as we always say, hope is never enough. So this year with COP26, it's an essential opportunity for us to make change. And sorry, I'm getting a bit muddled. And that makes this year essential and this election essential and the results of this. So yes, we will not go anywhere and we will put pressure on you guys to do what you need to do, but that shouldn't be our responsibility. And we're not going anywhere, but please do fill us with hope again and make the world less bleak. for the future.
Well, I'm supposed to finish with a vote of thanks after that. I'm not quite sure how to do so. I have to say I've got 2 minutes to finish up, and I must say I just find it humbling to hear your coherent arguments, you young people. I actually have been very impressed with the political responses. There's a great degree of commonality here. What's obvious is, of course, that we need to remember that we can act and that we can do something, and that we all need to act and we all need to do something. And as far as I'm concerned, the greater the power, the greater the responsibility to act. I'll leave that there, but I would just like to finish by thanking all concerned. First of all, thanks to the 3 students, Esther, Sandy and Dylan, for your brilliant questions and your brilliant contributions at the end. Fantastic. I'd like, if I may, just to thank Anna and Lily, who are in the background there, looking after the technology here. You've done a fantastic job. Of course, thank Teach the Future and Fridays for the Future, both excellent organisations. Now, the politicians and prospective politicians have all had lots of name checks throughout. So if you don't mind, I'll just say thank you to all of you for coming along. It's always good to see the willingness with which politicians will turn up to speak with young people. And that is one advantage that you do have, by the way, you young citizens, that I don't. I get to talk to politicians quite regularly, but they're coming along to talk to you, not because I'm here. So remember that. Thanks also to the Future Speaks, and that's Howard Beck, Tom Bird and Callum McClellan. And they have put a lot of the work into making this happen. And I'm here, of course, on behalf of the University of Edinburgh and Learning for Sustainability Scotland. These are parts of my day job. Tomorrow I'm teaching a class of people who want to come back into teaching after a career break. And the thing I'll be talking to them about is learning for sustainability, all the stuff we're talking about tonight. So it's a great opportunity to hear your thoughts. Finally, there's one more thing to say, which is this is one of a series of 8 events, as I said earlier, and the next event will be based in the south of Scotland. And of course, you'll be able to find out all the information through the Future Speaks. So with that, I think I just have to say thank you to you all. I wish you well for the rest of the evening, however you plan to spend your Friday evening, and certainly the rest of the year. It will be an exciting time coming up to the elections. And isn't it a wonderful thing to think that we have, as I said at the start, enough of a grown-up approach to government in Scotland that we have 16-year-olds voting for the national elections. So I'm looking forward to what happens there. And then, of course, the COP in November. Let's make sure we'll have our voices heard for that too. So thank you all to everybody. And with that, I think I say good night.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you.